It is Thanksgiving week. We've got no teams on bye, 3 games on Thursday. For the first time ever, a game on Black Friday. And I'm willing to bet that your Thanksgiving feast is going to be way more bountiful than the waiver wire this week. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? I tell you what, if you're looking for help on the waivers this week, there might be a couple of guys, and outside of that, you're just taking shots in the dark. But with no teams on a bye this week, hopefully your roster is looking really good. You're going to be able to set your best lineup possible, and you'll be able to roll through Thanksgiving week. And the only thing that you'll need to worry about is what time does the turkey need to go in the oven. And I almost guarantee there's going to be some people down in the comments that tell me turkey's gross and they eat ham on Thanksgiving. Whatever you want to eat, you're more than welcome to, but we're gonna hop right into the waiver wires. I've got running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that we need to take a look at this week. I've got some streaming options at the quarterback and defensive special teams positions, and I don't know if we're thinking about dropping anybody, but we'll talk about it later in the show. After D'Onta Foreman went down with an injury during the Lions game, it was basically Khalil Herbert from there on out with a little bit of Roschon Johnson mixed in. Now, Khalil Herbert before his injury was the starter, and he was actually playing very well in the couple of games leading up to his injury. So I anticipate him being the starter once again. And he's still around 60% owned in some platforms, a little bit lower, a little bit higher in different areas. But if for some reason he is still out there in your league, if you have a little bit of a shallower league, I definitely would grab him up, because at this point, we don't know how long D'Onta Foreman could potentially be missing for, and he was even a little bit banged up going into the game. Now, his name's not on the screen, but I'll talk about Roschon Johnson real quick as well, because a lot of people were holding on to him early in the season, hoping that he would be the guy. And even after Herbert went down with his injury, Roschon Johnson missed a couple of games with a concussion, but before and after that, wasn't really making any type of an impact. So if Foreman ends up missing any time, he's likely the RB2. We'll probably get a little bit of work, but Herbert will probably see a majority of it. Are we stashing Roschon Johnson once again? At this point, once we find out what's going on with Foreman, if he plans on missing any time, then yes, Johnson would need to be owned. But for now, Khalil Herbert, he'll be the guy. For those of you that have been waiting for Devon Achane, you were ready to get him back into your lineup. And then he had one play and left with a knee injury. After coming back out from the locker room, he was seen on the sideline with no helmet, and apparently he was trying to get back into the game. He was talking to the coaches in their ear, wanting to go back out there, and Mike McDaniel said, you know what, we're gonna play it safe with you, and just held him out the rest of the game. So we don't know at this point how serious the knee injury could end up being, if he's gonna miss any time, or if he really just tweaked something and they said, you know what, let's just play it safe for this week. So we'll be keeping an eye on that for the rest of the week. But for those of you that might be looking for a backup to Raheem Mostert, if Achane were to miss another game, it was Salvon Ahmed who came in as the backup running back and even ended up scoring a touchdown. So once again, Ahmed isn't anybody that we're running after unless we find out that Achane is going to be missing time. So just keep an eye on that and make sure that you have notifications on whatever platform you use for your news, so then you know whether or not he's going to be missing. From everything I've read, it sounds like Kyren Williams is going to be ready to go, but for some reason, if he's not ready by the end of the week and a really good matchup going up against Arizona, Royce Freeman would be the guy to own in that matchup. Darrell Henderson has been the guy at the running back position, but this past week, it definitely flipped the script and Royce Freeman ended up taking over as the guy. Not 100% sure why, and Darrell Henderson almost had a big time touchdown if it wasn't for a little bit of an errant pass from Matthew Stafford, but it definitely feels like Royce Freeman is the guy on the ground right now. We'll continue to monitor that, but Kyren Williams, once he comes back, you can own Royce Freeman as your backup, but he's not going to be fantasy viable because Williams will be the guy. Now, Zach Charbonnet, for probably 95% of you watching this video, is already owned in your fantasy leagues, but for those 5% of you where he's available, you're going to want to grab him. And the reason that a lot of us have been holding him all season long for is exactly what just happened. Kenneth Walker and that oblique injury. Now, when he went to make a cut, he immediately grabbed his side, limped off the field, and he was done at that point. And you could tell based on the video that he's probably going to be missing some time. There's some concern that it's even a lot worse than what may be anticipated. So you're going to want to keep an eye on that. For you Kenneth Walker owners, I've been saying it for weeks. You need to be handcuffing your running backs. And this right here is exactly why. Because if you didn't have Zach Charbonnet, you're going to be trying to battle on the waiver wire for a bunch of guys that aren't going to make a fantasy impact. So if you don't have the depth at your position, you are going to be in trouble. So for this week, we definitely need to play with Zach Charbonnet on our team. We need to get him no matter what. All of your fab, whatever you got, if he's still available on the waiver wire, go and get him. And if you own him, you may have a top 24 running back the rest of the way. All right, for those of you in leagues where you're scrounging for players, maybe you play in a PPR league, I'm going to toss Samaje Perine back up here because he saw 7 targets on Sunday Night Football and has had at least 4 targets in each of the last 4 games. Now, Jaleel McLaughlin is also being utilized a little bit. Now, he saw 4 targets on Sunday Night Football, but Perine in the passing game has kind of been used in those late game situations a little bit more often than what Jaleel McLaughlin has. So for me personally, I am going to stick to Samaje Perine right now if you're looking for a flex option because you're dealing with injuries in a PPR league. But honestly, anything less than PPR, you're probably just going to want to stay away anyway. All right, let's move on over to the wide receiver position. And I've got Nelson Agholor listed over Odell Beckham Jr. because as of right now, we're not 100% sure if OBJ may be missing some time with that arm injury that he sustained at the end of that Thursday night game. OBJ absolutely had the better game. And if OBJ is available and we find out that he is in fact ready to go for next week, I would take OBJ over Nelson Agholor. So make sure that you keep that in mind as you hit the waiver wires this week and keep an eye out for what's going on with OBJ. But with no Mark Andrews, there is definitely going to be an opportunity for a better target share. And we'll talk about Isaiah Likely when we get to the tight ends. But if for some reason we find out that OBJ also may be missing time, then Nelson Agholor would be the next guy up that you would be taking a shot at. Now, he only had 1 target last week, and it was for a touchdown, which is great. Earlier in the season, we did see him make a couple of bigger plays and see some decent targets from him, so he's not going to be a guy that probably sustains value for very long. But if you're needing to stream somebody at the wide receiver position this week, if we have that OBJ injury, like I mentioned, Agholor would be a guy that I would take a look at. And if OBJ is fine, then pick up OBJ instead. All right, now Trenton Irwin is going to be on here for a couple of different reasons. Number one, T. Higgins is banged up right now. And with Joe Burrow now being done for the season and the record for Cincinnati not looking all that great, I don't know if T. Higgins is going to be trying to rush himself back. He's got a big offseason ahead of him, and he definitely could find himself landing as the number 1 on another team. And if that were to happen, he's not going to want to go into the offseason in any type of limited capacity because he's been banged up during the season. So Trenton Irwin may be a guy that we take a look at, especially considering with Jake Browning stepping up into the starting position now. Him and Irwin working together in the second team unit probably have a little bit of chemistry. Now, do I expect him to make a big time impact? No. And there's going to be another Bengal that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes that I would prefer over Irwin. But for those of you that play in any type of special team leagues where you get return yard points and things like that, Irwin may also be able to help out in that area. Jameson Williams came up late with a huge touchdown en route to the Detroit Lions, making that big comeback against the Chicago Bears. And at one point, Josh Reynolds had to head to the locker room. Now we're trying to turn around on short rest, playing the early game on Thursday, which means if Josh Reynolds is banged up or limited in any capacity, there is potential where he could end up missing this week. And if that happens, Jameson Williams definitely could be in line for an increased workload. Detroit wants to trust him more, and I think we're getting there, and I think this end of the game play will definitely help out in that area. He'll still be boom or bust. It's going to take a big play to make the day, but with no Josh Reynolds, it could happen. I know plenty of people are going to ask about Greg Dortch if I don't listen, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not interested in even picking up Greg Dortch. One of the reasons why he had a decent game is because Michael Wilson didn't play. So if Michael Wilson is able to work his way back, that's going to be the guy that goes back into the place of Greg Dortch. So just keep an eye on that. If you're looking to go grab him because of his target share from this past week, just remember when Michael Wilson comes back, that's probably not going to happen. And Michael Wilson, for those of you that have been listening over the last few weeks, I'm still expecting some potential target share volume for him down the stretch that could make him fantasy viable. So keep an eye on him, especially after being injured. He may have been dropped and you might be able to grab him cheap. Elijah Moore caught 6 of his 7 targets for 60 yards with DTR at the quarterback position this week. And quite honestly, I could see a lot of performances like that down the stretch. DTR finding his guys short, intermediate routes and letting them work into the open field. That definitely seems to be the game plan for the Cleveland Browns. So for Elijah Moore, he fits that. That's exactly what he can excel at with his tools. David Njoku got a big bump as well, and we won't talk about him because he's way too widely owned, but it is feasible that Elijah Moore will at least be the wide receiver 2 and possibly the number 3 target behind Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and maybe even push Amari Cooper for some wide receiver 1 targets in any given week. Brandon Cooks for Dallas has some really nice matchups coming up in the next few weeks, and he's a guy that has at least 4 targets in all but 2 games this year. Now, has he put together fantasy viable performances much this year? No, he hasn't. But once again, with the upcoming schedule for Dallas, you absolutely could see some massive plays out of him. Going up against Detroit this week, Jayden Reed is going to have plenty of opportunities. Now, Christian Watson ended up scoring this past week, but he only had 2 targets and only had 21 receiving yards. Jayden Reed is being utilized all over the place. He's being utilized as a wide receiver on those sweeps out of the backfield, lining up all over the place. They're definitely trying to utilize his speed and open space and have him do a lot, evidenced by his touchdown run this past week as well. If I'm looking for the most consistent option for the Green Bay Packers right now, it's Romeo Doubs. If I'm looking for the guy with the highest upside, though, it's Jayden Reed. Apparently, Tommy DeVito morphed into Tommy Brady this past week because the dude looked great for the first time this year, and the New York Giants trusted him to go out and just play football. In fact, he might be the best starting quarterback in New York right now. I'm not counting the Buffalo Bills. Bills fans, calm down. I'm talking about the Giants and the Jets. So for Tommy DeVito, if he's going to play like this the rest of the year, he has a real connection with Darius Slayton, it feels like. Slayton has a little bit of big play dependency for me, but once again, for those of you in deeper leagues, if you're looking to stash somebody on your bench, maybe Slayton would be a guy to go with. Cooper Kupp, unfortunately, this week was one of the casualties to an injury. A lot of big names going down this week. And because of that, Tutu Atwell absolutely needs to be on your radar once again, because at the beginning of the season, with no Cooper Kupp, Tutu Atwell was looked at quite a bit. So make sure that you've got him picked back up if you had Cooper Kupp, and you can get some share of that Rams offense once again. Khalil Shakir continues to thrive in the slot, and this past week numbers absolutely are amplified by really one big touchdown reception. But he continues to be utilized out of the slot and continues to be put in opportunities to win in open space. For those of you that are out there looking for just anybody to help your team out, Shakir is definitely a guy that isn't going to win you very many weeks. Even though he had pretty big numbers this past week, once again, big play dependent. We don't want to rely on that too much. But if he doesn't win you your week, he should still see enough volume, hopefully moving forward, that he can put you in a position to get you enough points to not lose your week either. Demario Douglas, there isn't really much to say about this guy because I've been saying his name for several weeks now. How is he still under 50% owned? I'm not kidding. On all major fantasy platforms, none of them have Demario Douglas higher than 50% owned. He's been one of the most consistent PPR wide receivers over the last several weeks, and he's been a guy that is absolutely a wide receiver 3 on your team the last several weeks, but honestly, has crept into wide receiver 2 territory as well. We need to be adding him. At worst, it's just good depth. Just a reminder for Josh Downs, coming out of the bye, may have been dropped quite a bit because he was injured, and hopefully he's back to being 100% healthy. Before he got hurt, he had a huge target share. If he's back to being 100%, he's probably going to have that huge target share once again coming out of the bye. And I got to bring up my boy Rashid Shaheed. Why? Because Michael Thomas is hurt, and we don't have a lot of information on Derek Carr and his shoulder injury from last week. If it ends up being Jameis Winston this week, we know they're going to air it out. Who cares if Winston throws 3, 4, 5, 6 interceptions? All right, maybe I got a little bit ahead of myself. We know some interceptions will definitely be coming, but we know he's going to air it out, and Shaheed is the big play guy on this team. Absolutely, he is somebody that we could potentially be starting for the next couple of weeks. All right, not a ton to talk about this week at the tight end position, but I definitely have some guys we need to be taking a look at, especially one guy that is a deep tight end option for those of you that are scrambling for somebody right now. For a majority of you that have Mark Andrews and you now have lost him for the remainder of the season, you're going to be looking at Isaiah Likely, and I get that, and I'm going to encourage you to probably go that route anyway, but just keep in mind that Isaiah Likely had a couple of big games when Mark Andrews went down at one point, and everybody was like, oh, whenever Mark Andrews is out, he's the guy. But when Mark Andrews missed after that over the last few games, he hasn't done anything. So Isaiah Likely hasn't even really been looked at. And when those injuries happened and Isaiah Likely had big games, they didn't really have anyone else to pass to either. Now they have Nelson Aguilar, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, OBJ if he's healthy. So they still have a lot of different options that they can utilize now. So am I saying Isaiah Likely is just going to replace Mark Andrews as a top tight end? Absolutely not. Now, he is going to be the best shot for some of you that had Andrews, because at least you can replace potentially his production within the team in terms of target share. Now, if it turns into anything, that's going to be something that we'll have to keep an eye on. So Likely is really a 50-50 toss-up for me right now. It brings a lot of risk hoping for him to hit, but you may not have any other options. Now, you might want to call this a hot take, but they don't call me the tight end whisperer for nothing. Okay, I've earned my nickname over the last few years, and my ability to not only call the tight end position pretty well, but to find those guys that are super deep in leagues that can pop up and help you out. Tanner Hudson, for me, is a guy that I've been watching but haven't really been into quite yet, because Burrow really hasn't utilized the tight end position a whole lot this year, and Irv Smith Jr. was still getting a decent amount of snaps. But over the last 4 weeks, Tanner Hudson has 16 targets. Now, we're moving forward with Jake Browning being the guy at the quarterback position. And more than likely, we're going to find ourselves in a scenario where Jake Browning is going to be getting rid of the football quickly. And this offense is going to set themselves up to target those high percentage completion areas where Tanner Hudson would likely be the best bet. Now, he's not replacing Jamar Chase by any means, but he definitely has a shot at being the number 3 target option between Chase and Boyd, and really seeing some of those late game check down targets where they're trying to move the ball down the field. If the Cincinnati Bengals are behind and defenses are playing more prevent, just trying to keep the big play away from Chase or Boyd, Tanner Hudson's going to get some check downs. So do I think he's going to win you your leagues heading down the stretch? I don't. But I think he could save your tight end position, and he could save you from having to worry about it every single week. And this is where the hot take comes in. I also feel like that Tanner Hudson is going to be a better option for your team down the stretch than what Isaiah Likely will be. Donald Parham, he's definitely a guy that we're only taking a shot at if Gerald Everett misses again. So are we going to add him during the waiver period this week? Probably not, because I assume that he clears and you can pick him up for free after that. So if we find out later in the week that Everett's dealing with his injury still and isn't going to play, then we'll take a look at Parham and we'll go from there. And even though Pat Freiermuth only had 1 target this past week and it was a super down performance for him, I expect better days ahead. He's still a guy that's under 60% owned on a majority of platforms. And again, if you're dealing with injuries at the tight end position, we know once Pat Freiermuth gets back on the field and is feeling fully healthy, that Kenny Pickett's going to be looking his way quite a bit. All right, if you own Joe Burrow and you haven't made a trade yet, you're probably looking to stream somebody this week. And I've got a few options that we definitely could help you out with. Number 1 is going to be Jordan Love. Detroit is coming off a super emotional game where they had to fight right the entire time, especially on defense. The offense did them no justice with 4 turnovers in that game. The defense was on the field quite a bit more than what they have been this season, and it definitely showed at times. And now that they have to turn it around and come back on Thursday afternoon to try and play on short rest, with the way the secondary has looked recently, Jordan Love definitely could have himself a decent day. The next 2 guys come from the same game. Baker Mayfield going up against Indianapolis, that allows the 9th most passing yards to quarterbacks this season. And then you have Gardner Minshew for Indianapolis going up against Tampa Bay, who allows the 5th most passing yards during the season. So both of these guys, let's keep our fingers crossed that it's a shootout between Indianapolis and Tampa Bay this week, because if it is, both of these guys have really nice floors for you, and then their ceilings get even better. Now the floor itself is still pretty decent. Baker Mayfield, not a guy with a very high ceiling this season, but he's got plenty of weapons around him to definitely make it work going up against a defense that definitely allows a lot of yards. For Gardner Minshew, he brings a little bit more upside because he might run the ball a little bit more often, maybe a little bit more of a red zone threat to find the end zone for a touchdown. So because of that, Gardner Minshew might have a little bit of a higher ceiling than Baker Mayfield, but both of them have solid floors this week. All right, for defensive special teams streaming options, it's crazy to see Minnesota still widely available in a lot of leagues, because even though their defense can definitely give up some points, they're scoring fantasy points. In fact, they have scored the 6th most fantasy points among defensive special teams this season. And now they're getting a Chicago Bears offense that, yeah, they looked good at times on Sunday against Detroit, but again, leaving a highly emotional game where they weren't able to put it away late. Does that affect them going into this week? If it does, Minnesota definitely could find themselves creating a few turnovers and scoring points for your fantasy team. And I'm also going to be taking a look at Kansas City going up against Las Vegas. Kansas City still widely owned across multiple platforms, and they get rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell this week, coming off 3 interceptions, and he's looked really kind of good at best this season. So I don't expect him to put up a ton of points or a ton of yards up against this Kansas City Chiefs defense. Kansas City's going to be able to get after O'Connell, have some sacks, cause some turnovers, and definitely put up some fantasy points for your team. All right, for players to drop this week, I'm not going to list anybody. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for conversation in the comments. And if you have any issues with, do I drop this person for this person, let me know. Now, we've got a lot of videos to put out this week, so I'm going to try and get to as many comments as I can on Monday when this video drops. But with the way rosters are, and coming out of a week with so many injuries, Cooper Kupp, potentially a Chan again, Mark Andrews, Joe Burrow, Kenneth Walker, losing big time names like that, we can't always afford to just blindly say, drop this guy and this guy and this guy. So in the comments, let me know if you're looking to make a move and you want to drop somebody for another player to add in their place. Let me know in the comments, and I'm going to get back to you as quickly as possible. But keep it short and keep it sweet. Just say drop whatever player, add whatever player, and I'll give you a yes or a no. If for some reason maybe I have a follow-up question, I'll let you know. But we're going to keep it quick so I can get to as many as possible. Because again, we're going to have to do like 8 videos before Wednesday night to make sure you're set for kickoff Thursday afternoon. Headliner Nation, I'm gonna get out of here for though. Tons of work to go do. I'm gonna go get started on running backs. Everybody stay safe and healthy out there. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you next time on the Fantasy Headliners.